Hello and welcome to today's Heart Lift. Oh, Heart Lifters. We're talking about something near and dear to my heart. Yes, I know I say that a lot, but I am so happy to be talking about the art of vinemaking with our resident expert today, Bette Dickinson. So, welcome to the show, Bette. We were talking that you live in an area that I can't wait to visit, Traverse City, Michigan, and you extended an invitation. So right now is the right time to do that. I want you to tell my listeners and extend that invitation to them as well.
Yes. So the Art of Vinemaking was formed and created based on my experience here in Traverse City with my friend Dave Voss, who's a vine dresser and winemaker in the area. Traverse City is a growing wine region. And so with the book, I've been launching these journeys that start with a retreat right here in Traverse City. And the one here in October will be in Traverse City. There's other ones I'm launching in other places around the world. But we will get into the vineyards and chat with my friend Dave that I talk about in the book and drink some wine and have an encounter with God that is deeply connected to the vine and different spiritual practices over the course of the weekend. That then launches a guided cohort journey going through the online courses that are connected to the book. So it's a pretty rich experience, and we just had our first one this last year, and the participants are raving about it, saying, having an embodied experience like that changed everything. So
Wow.
love to have anybody want to join us.
Oh, I think we're going to have to put this on the calendar. That sounds,
Okay.
my birthday's in October, so that might be
Okay.
my birthday gift for sure. I love that you wrote this book on vinemaking, but you do call yourself a prophetic artist, which I understand what that means. What does that mean for everyone listening? And how then did Bette, the prophetic artist, because all the artwork in the book, the cover, everything is your artwork, and it is beautiful. How did that emerge in your life? When did you begin to recognize you were a prophetic artist? That word prophetic is very meaningful to me. So I want to hear how you were drawn to that. What was that process like? And then how were you drawn to the vines?
Good question. Well, it's interesting that you asked that actually, because a lot of the book, the story that I tell in the book, is around my journey as an artist, trying to own that exact thing of
Mhm.
rather than trying to strive to fit into somebody else's box of who I feel like our performance driven, productivity driven world wanted me to be, of uncovering what it meant to flourish for me as an artist is returning to that identity. And so when I say prophetic,
Mhm.
what I mean by that, because I get that question a lot, because there's
Mhm.
lots of different definitions or
Yes.
perspectives on that word.
Mhm.
And for me, simply, prophetic means somebody who listens and hears from God and then tells that message to
Yeah.
others. And that identity really arose for me when I had this encounter with God.
Mm.
It was actually an inner healing prayer experience. I don't know if you're familiar with inner
I
healing
am.
prayer,
Mhm.
but it's basically going back to a memory where you encountered a wound and seeing
Mhm.
where Jesus was in the moment and what he wants to help you see or understand in the midst of that and bring healing. So I
Mhm.
had an experience when I was in seminary that, I was one of the only women in the room, one of the only artists
Wow.
in the room,
Wow.
and my professor had to share what her major was in undergrad. And there were all these peers that were saying, Bible major, theology major, all these things. And it came to me and I said, art major. And my professor was like, oh, you know what great theologian was an artist? And I was like, who? And he's like, no one. That was a
Ooh,
moment. Yes, that was a wound
that's a
that
wound.
it was. And it was a moment that God brought me back to later in my story
Hmm.
when I started to realize that even though I had this longing to create and a desire to create, because I often felt the closest to God when I'm creating,
Mhm.
I just never could quite get around to creating. Like it was always, there were always obstacles. And I realized that some of those internal obstacles were because of that wound feeling like my artist soul was not wanted or
Ooh.
welcomed. And so God brought me back to that memory. And
Mm.
what, when I went through inner healing prayer, somebody had asked, what does Jesus want you to see? And when I went back into that
Oh.
moment, I saw this picture of where I had these giant wings. And Jesus said, Betty, that is your prophetic artist gift. And the prophetic artist gift is your role. And this is what I believe the role of a prophet is to do, is to fly up and see from my perspective and then come down and deliver that word through what you paint, through what you write, and through what you speak. And so I take that as a very personal
Hmm.
part of my identity, as God, I believe, has called me as a divine messenger.
Yeah.
So that part of my role is simply to listen. And some of that listening is things like listening to the vine and
Hmm.
learning from creation
Yeah.
and learning from what is God teaching us? What is he revealing that needs
Hmm.
to be uncovered for this moment, for this people?
All
So
right.
that's how I would
Ooh,
define prophetic in a this is just a nutshell of the story. So,
it's beautiful. It's powerful. It's you availing yourself, though, like availing yourself later on to be in a place, because you talk a lot about place
mm-hmm.
in this book. And I want to
Yes.
really dig into that. And I think that when you were in the inner healing prayer, your wound took place in a place and then it
Yep.
rooted, I'm sure. And
Yes.
then your healing took place in a place.
Mm-hmm.
And I just think place is so critical to the movement of the spirit in our lives. And so when I
Mm,
started reading through your book, and I just thought, oh wow, this is so important for such a time as this. And I'm so
mm,
grateful that you were under great guidance in that inner prayer to take you to a place like where you would see that vision. And
right.
I think that's what we all are longing for, to have that kind of clarity in our place in God's kingdom. Like, what is
Mm-hmm.
mine to do,
Yes.
specifically, God? And I think your conversation is going to really help us all
Hmm.
maybe plant ourselves in the right soil, the right place in
Mm.
which to grow. So I appreciate that.
Yes. Thanks, Janelle.
It's really warm here today in Virginia, so all the little
Okay.
allergens are just like flying around.
The climate's quite different here in the terroir of Traverse City than it is from where you are.
On the back cover of the book, Betty, you proffer two questions. And I love these two questions. What I'm trying to do in the podcast as I'm moving into some new ways of offering material is to bring more questions to the table.
Hmm. Hmm.
And so that we can continue meditating upon them during the week and meet together on the different spaces that I have for my heart lifters. And one of them is, what if fruitfulness wasn't something you had to strive for? Now, you just mentioned that when you were in seminary and your wound happened, and also being an artist, our society is so productivity driven. It
Mm-hmm.
obsessed. And I have not lived any other type of life, but a life that measures my worth by productivity.
Yeah.
And due to some recent circumstances in my health, it has enforced me to rest and
Hmm.
lean in, like you were just explaining, to the Holy Spirit to answer that question, what do I see? And I just want to encourage all heart lifters to just really take Betty's initial story here so quickly in the beginning here of leaning into your life and sitting and being quiet and asking yourself, what do you see?
Hmm. Mm-hmm.
And what will God say to that? You know, and this question, what if fruitfulness wasn't something you had to strive for? I can't even imagine living a life that I'm not striving in.
Yeah.
It's out of
Maybe.
I just told God, you're gonna have to do this. Well, he did. He caused
Mm,
me to have a heart problem. And I'm
wow.
saying that in his great love for me that
Mm,
stopped me because you need your heart.
yeah.
So why that question?
Mm, hmm.
Hmm.
Well, I think because, like you, I also have lived a life of a lot of striving. And
Mm.
because that's just the culture that we swim in here in
It's all we
Western
know.
society. Yes. And I think that question came up for me actually the very first time I met my friend Dave, who's this vine dresser that I have learned from throughout the course of writing this book.
Let's take a moment and get to know Dave. Dave is a vine dresser and winemaker who recently had moved to Traverse City, Michigan from Napa Valley to consult for vineyard owners on organic farming. He and his wife Jackie were dreaming of one day starting a wine garden and label in the area. When Betty called to set up her meeting with Dave, she told him she wanted to take pictures of the vines to use as a source for the images for a painting. But beneath that request was a deeper longing. Like many followers of Jesus, the words in John 15:1, I am the true vine and my Father is the vine dresser, had deeply shaped my spiritual life. Now I had a chance to meet a real vine dresser using cultivation practices akin to those in Jesus' day. I was full of anticipation and questions. You know, I always say when the student is ready, the teacher appears. And this story about Betty and Dave's relationship in the vineyard is so inspiring. And it's inspiring me to really, really seek for teachers in my life. I hope it encourages you too.
And what stopped me in my tracks was that the first time that I met with him, I asked him, so what do vine dressers pay attention to when tending vines? And he said, actually, vine dressers don't pay much attention to the fruit. They pay
I,
attention.
I'm
Yes,
sorry.
exactly. Yeah,
When
when they
I read
discovered
it,
it.
when I read that, I have it written down, ask her this. I was like, what?
Yeah, me too.
What? Okay, go ahead.
Okay, so he said they pay attention to the health, the quality, and the vitality of the vine. And if you pay attention to those things, fruit will be the natural byproduct, which, as somebody in who has worked in ministry for a long time, and I know this is the case in
Ooh.
many industries,
Mm-hmm.
there is a output driven, metrics driven way in which we evaluate ourselves, our ministries, how big it is, how many people are coming to Jesus, how many people are in your small groups. And so when he said that, it immediately sent me on this journey of needing to know more of
Ah,
what do you mean that
yes.
fruit isn't that? I mean, it's the overflow of a longer journey with the vine dresser and the vine that is so rarely talked about.
Mm,
But the reality is, and I think we just have a trouble getting this in our culture today because we're so disconnected from the land in how
yes.
things grow and how long things take, that I think we often think it's always harvest time. It's always harvest, that there's
Oh,
always fruit. We always have to be harvesting fruit, right?
oh my gosh. That is so right. I'm going
Yeah.
to really try hard to not jump out of my seat because I've not ever heard it said that way,
Mm,
that we are living in a constant state of harvest. That is the
yes.
expectation, right?
Yes.
The
Yep.
misaligned expectation.
Hmm.
That is resonating so deeply in my core. I can't thank you enough for saying what you just said because certainly nature, the land, does not live that way.
Right.
They don't live that
Right.
way.
Correct.
Okay.
Which, if you look at, when Romans 1 says that creation reveals God's invisible qualities,
Hmm.
it has a pattern and way and rhythm through which all life grows, and the cyclical rhythm actually of Christ's life, death, and resurrection is embedded within creation itself in
It
terms
is.
of how our lives are designed to progress. And even in Genesis, when it says that God set the stars and the moon and the sun in place to mark the times and seasons,
Yeah.
it's it's a rhythm in which everything goes in these cycles of descent into dormancy and
Mhm.
waiting and rest, and
Yes.
then emerging in bud break with resurrection and growth. And then it's only the overflow of those two things that
Mm.
then leads to harvest. And some years, I mean, what I learned from Dave is that there's some years and then there's some vines that he will take the fruit off so that it will focus on growing its roots.
Oh. Oh.
Yes. So
Oh.
vines, young vines, vines that are 3 years or younger, they will, you're supposed to take the fruit off. It will try to produce fruit, but if you let it try to produce fruit, it will crash the vine. It'll burn it out and you won't be able to get fruit the next year. So
Oh.
vine dressers, good vine dressers, loving vine dressers will take the fruit off so that it can focus on growing a healthy and strong root system.
Oh my goodness. Wow. So that is the pruning aspect. Is that what you're referring to by the pruning, or no? Is this
That's not
different?
necessarily called pruning. So
Okay.
pruning, it is a little bit that way. When pruning happens, Dave will often assess, and this is for vines that are older than 3 years, right when that growth starts to happen, he'll cut the vines back. And sometimes, if the vine isn't healthy enough to bear fruit, if it in the previous year, if it hasn't grown up to the top wire of the trellis on both sides of the
Uh,
vine, he'll prune it back even harder than a typical vine because he, again, wants the focus to be less on growing more branches and growing more fruit and more on the roots.
on the
But even
roots.
still, for every vine, he still, even healthy vines, he'll cut it back 90%.
Oh my
90%.
goodness.
Hmm.
Wow. And he's keen. That's his acumen. He knows what he's doing
Right.
because of his training and all of his years of study, I would assume. So when
Hmm.
he said to you, well, actually, the focus is not on the fruit, it's on the development of the roots and the branches and all of that, you leaned in. You
Hmm.
were hooked. And is that when you entered into this deep dive into the art of winemaking yourself? Is that the moment?
Yeah,
Yeah.
yes,
Okay.
because and I basically, became kind of a vine dresser's apprentice. And he said,
Oh,
"Hey,
you
anytime,
lucky you.
anytime, yeah," he said, "anytime you want to come learn more about the vine." And I don't think he knew exactly what he was offering when I took him up on that for, 6 years. And every season
Ooh.
of the vine, I was getting into the vineyard, taking pictures, taking notes, asking questions, and it took many seasons in uh, vintages of the vine before I really was able to marinate in the reality that was so different from what I had experienced in the ministry world
Okay.
and in our culture around, you
Sure.
know, I think partially maybe it's due to the Industrial Revolution
Mm,
where
you're right about that. Yeah.
yeah, so there's this sort of view we have on ourselves or our world that we're like machines that just
Hmm.
need a constant stream of electricity or power or gas to go, and that it's never stopping, and that
No.
it always needs to increase. Every year it's got to be more and more and more. And if you're not increasing, then you're a failure.
Yes, for sure.
And that's the way we view things. But the reality is, especially when it comes to vines and wine, quantity is not what you're going for.
Hmm.
You're going for quality.
Hmm.
And which I just find so fascinating that that's what Jesus chose as he's talking about our
Yes.
relationship with him and what fruit looks like. That it's not about how much, but it's the quality of what
Oh
is
my
there that
goodness.
matters.
Jesus. Wow. Just gotta let that sink in. Just a minute.
Yeah.
because he did write about it in John 15. He set that example before us. Why do you think that now that you've dwelt in the land, you're an agrarian and have spent time?
I wouldn't go that far.
I know. Okay. Well, you're far more than I am. So I just love the fact that you have spent that long of a time because I can count how many times I've said to someone, I would just love to spend so much time learning beekeeping or bread making or
Mm.
something, but
Hmm.
you did it and I love it. You committed.
I did.
You did, and you produced great
Hmm.
fruit in this work, this book, and all that you're doing now because of that. So it's very clear that you were drawn to it. It was yours to do. I love that. And so I wonder what do you think now about John 15? Why do you think he chose that? As you say, they were an agrarian society.
Hmm.
It was important. Wine was flowing, it was in milk and honey. I mean, wine has just been such an important part of the scriptures, yet it's such a
Mm.
controversial topic. Even to this day, of believers drinking wine. So I'm
Hmm.
just so curious as to what John 15 might mean to you now
Hmm.
in the place where you're rooted, as
Hmm.
opposed to when you were in ministry and rooted in that soil.
Yeah, a few reasons. I think one, actually, I had this conversation with my vine dresser friend Dave, and he said, it's interesting that Jesus chose a vine and not an olive tree or
Yes,
something in that culture at the time, which was, olive trees were very prevalent.
very much
But
so.
he said vines, more than any other plant, are the most labor intensive to take care of. They require the most amount of
Oh,
attention, the most amount of care. He said,
oh,
you could prune a apple tree or a cherry tree and you make one or two passes throughout the growing season and it's fine. But he said no, in the growing season, he's making 8 to 10 different passes through the
wow.
vineyards, pruning, tending, cutting off some of the suckers, uh, composting, all the things. And he said, and I really think that shows us a lot, first of all, about God's intentional care of us, that he is an active participant in our journey and lives, that he wants to
Okay.
be close, he wants to draw near, he wants to tend us. It's a very
Hmm.
relational uh, it's a very relational act, vine dressing, because you have to respond to what the vine is doing. If you're a good vine dresser, it's very
Mhm.
uh, individual by in terms of the attention to each vine, and each branch is different and requires different needs and different ways of responding.
Wow. Each branch of the vine
Yeah.
itself, not of like the Merlot grapevines and the Cabernet.
Yes.
It's each
Yeah,
branch
each
on the
vine.
vine.
Yes, yes. And I
Hmm.
think the other thing, as I've done more theological and scriptural study of the vine and wine in the Bible, I mean, what Jesus is saying is an incredibly profound statement. When he says, "I am the true vine," the people who heard that would have understood that back in the Old Testament, in right when Israel was established as a nation, they were the vine. And that Psalm 80
Right.
talks about
Mm.
how God transplanted Israel from Egypt and
Right.
planted them in the promised land, their soul's ground and terroir, as we can
Terroir.
chat about that. So the fascinating thing here is that Jesus is saying, Israel, as you look at the story of Israel and sort of what the prophets had said, that they were not a fruitful vine. They didn't live into the call that God had on them to be able to yield quality fruit. And the wine in scripture was a representation of God's covenant with his people.
Wow.
And so if you think about the overflow of the people of Israel as this vine was supposed to be this picture of this wine, of this covenant between God and his people. And that when people were tasting that fruit and tasting the wine of that, they would taste the joy and communion and
Oh, wow.
celebration of intimacy and joy with God himself. Yes. So then when Jesus says, I am the true vine, he's saying, where Israel failed, to live into God's design, to reflect that covenant, to be a people who are just and loving and reflecting God's character. I am the true vine. And my relationship with you as a branch of this vine is that together, through common union, for you being grafted into my very life, you
Mm-hmm.
will bear fruit. That is an expression of that covenant now, which is communion, right?
Right. Exactly.
It's an overflow of this intimate relationship with God and with the branches of the people
Right.
of God. That is this overflow and expression of the character of God expressed in his covenant, which I think is another piece of, I think when we think about fruit,
Mm-hmm.
we have maybe different definitions than what Jesus would have had.
Go ahead.
What
I want you to
fruit?
enlighten us. I know
Because
that I do. So,
I think when we think about fruit in our culture, we think it's some kind of external metric of success,
Mhm.
right? But if you think of it in the context of wine again, quality over quantity. The quality that Jesus is after, and he talks about this throughout the Gospels around what is the fruit that he's seeking is the fruit that is an expression of God's kingdom, is an expression of
Right.
goodness and kindness and justice, and
Mercy,
everything that the
justice.
fruit of the Spirit
All the fruit.
is
Yes.
love, joy, peace,
Hmm.
patience, kindness, goodness, gentleness, faithfulness, and self
Yes.
control,
Well
which
done.
I think is, as I write about in the book, I think we need to reframe our understanding of what fruitfulness is. Fruitfulness is a product, it's a performance, it's a
Yeah.
number, it's a metric. Whereas Jesus said, no, fruit is my character.
Ooh, but just got
Fruit
to
is
say
my
it again.
character.
Fruit. You did.
Fruit is my character. So I think we need to sort of reframe what that means. And, I think back to the question around why the vine,
Yeah.
I think as we listen to and watch, and what I've observed of the vine is, like I said, this cyclical rhythm of life, death, and resurrection.
So you have this beautiful cyclical illustration,
Hmm.
and the whole book is centered around that. These three major phases of the cycle, I guess we would say.
Hmm. Hmm.
Life, which is ripening fruit. And
Hmm.
I cannot say the first word. I have it to ask you. Veraison? How do you say?
Verasion. Verasion,
Verasion.
which is
Verasion.
ripening. Hmm.
Ripening. That's what verasion is.
Yes. Yes.
Ripening. Harvest, and then the wine. Okay. Then it goes to death,
Hmm.
which is the pruning, the dormancy. I would love
Hmm.
to talk about that. And post harvest, descent into the roots. Then we go into resurrection, which
Hmm.
is ascent into the branches. And that involves the bud break,
Hmm.
the growing, and the flowering.
Hmm.
So this is a common cyclical theme throughout the whole book.
Hmm.
And I was very curious about the Verizon.
Verasion.
Verizon.
Yeah.
I'm saying Verizon as the company. Verizon. Yes. Can you just enlighten us just a little bit about what Verizon
Mm.
is and how that applies to us as followers?
So Veracian is right. It's this turning point from
Mm.
the vine focusing on growing for itself. So growing, putting out more branches, putting out more leaves, to when veracian happens, which is after flowering, the flowering sets the fruit, right?
Yep.
So if you know much about how fruit is grown, it's often the flower comes first.
Right.
So veracian is where that fruit then is set and is starting to ripen and soften and sweeten. So then the vine's energy channels into, instead of just growing, it's now channeling its energy into ripening fruit and giving itself away, right? To plant more seeds, but also as a generous offering and gift
Mm,
to the rest of creation, right? So it's
mhm.
mutual, right? It benefits the vine because
Yes.
it plants seeds and it
Right.
benefits the eater because it gives food, which I just think that in itself is beautiful that God has
It's
woven that
incredible. It
into
is.
creation's design. But
Yeah.
I think what's fascinating is, as you think about our journey as followers of Jesus, is if this is sort of the life cycle, this is the life part of the vine where we've had this journey from dying with Christ, rising with Christ, and then ripening the fruit of the kingdom. This
Hmm.
is where all of the journey leading up to that point of who we are becoming in God, who we're becoming
Ah,
in his community, that then
right.
overflows into the gifts that we offer the world that is an expression of his very life.
Right.
Which, as I think about this, and I mentioned this in the book too, Teresa of Avila
Mhm.
explains it that, Christ has no body now but yours. Yours are the
Right.
hands with which he blesses the whole world. And
Mm,
that
mm, mm.
that is what the fruit is. It is Jesus's life
Hmm.
through our flesh that is
Hmm.
blessing the world as an offering.
Yeah, and that's authentic and genuine and real and all those words.
Hmm.
It's a way, it really is a way from metrics. Not that metrics aren't helpful or useful tool in many ways, but in what you're saying, like in the subtitle, spiritual flourishing in a productivity driven culture, what your mission, your words, your art, everything about you is inciting us to grasp this new understanding of what it means to produce fruit,
Mm,
right? And to
yeah.
flourish. We call it eudaimonia, right? To have a meaningful life
Hmm.
and not one that's driven and striving. And
Yeah.
quite the opposite. It would be one, as you're writing and telling us, an invitation to abiding,
Yeah.
right? And you cannot produce that succulent, beautiful, life-giving fruit if you're not abiding.
Right.
And
Right.
to me, that's where the balances are off.
Hmm.
For me, for sure, because I have resisted abiding,
Mm,
practicing the contemplatives, just being silent still until I'm forced to, which
hmm.
is grievous to me and
Yeah.
lamentable, But it's like
Hmm.
God in his grace and his mercy just offers it again and again. Like here, I need you to abide in me. So when your
Yeah.
book came to me, I was just like, this is such a teacher for such a time as this. And I just am so grateful, Betty, that you responded to Dave's question by becoming his apprentice, his statement by becoming his
Hmm.
apprentice and spending all of this time to help us. So
Mm.
then we go into pruning, dormancy, and post harvest. So, why is the dormancy, that part of the death process, why is that so critical to the vine?
Yeah, what's fascinating is, they're still doing research on what exactly happens on the inside of a vine, right? And I think this
Love
part's
that.
fascinating too, because what happens in the soil is a great mystery that scientists are still trying to unpack, which I think
Don't you love it?
is such a beautiful parallel of the spiritual life, right? That
Yeah.
it's a hidden thing. But yet, if you think about the billions of different microorganisms, there's a whole diverse community in the soil. And
Yes.
so dormancy is a withdrawing into the roots, into the soil. It's withdrawing the energy from producing fruit down into the roots. And so actually right after harvest goes into post-harvest where there's this transition point where the vines take the remaining energy that they're soaking up from the leaves before they
Mm.
fall off, and they, after the grapes have been taken to the winery, they use that remaining energy to channel down into the roots and store over winter. Yeah. And if a vine doesn't go through that cycle of descent into dormancy, then it won't produce fruit. So, in fact, they see this with, if you know, ice wine is wine
Yes.
that they wait to pick it until after the first frost. So, what that means is the vine has not been able to have a chance to take the energy from the leaves and put it into the roots because it's still trying to ripen
Ah,
those grapes. so then it won't produce fruit the next year
Yet we keep pushing ourselves to produce fruit
year
nonstop, to
round.
live in perpetual harvest.
Yes.
So
And
that
it,
is a lean in moment, heart
mhm.
lifters, to, like I said, this is just all for me, but I'm sharing Betty with you today. But I think we just have this unrealistic expectation, or I do. And so you're
Mhm.
right. I've learned a lot about ice wine from a Hallmark movie.
I love it.
I know it's so silly, but I did. So anyway, they
Hmm.
did a whole movie on ice wine, which I thought was
Hmm.
so interesting and curious. So therefore, we can't bypass
Mm-mm.
any of these cyclical truths that are happening in nature, but yet we try to, we do
Right.
in our
Yes.
lives.
Hmm.
So dormancy then is that time of rest.
Yeah.
Is that what I'm hearing you say?
Yeah. Rest. And, I think one of the interesting parallels that I've explored with this too is it's really so physically, it's this descent into the soil, it's this time of rest, it's this time of withdrawing, and a time of preparation within
Mm,
the vine,
hmm.
storing the energy, getting itself ready for the next growing season. So
Yeah.
it's not a wasted season.
No.
It is not less important than harvest. It is essential for harvest. And so I think that's the part that we
Mm.
often miss is it's just like, well, do we really need it? Do we really? Yes, you do.
Well, we
And I think,
do. Right.
yeah. And I
It's
think, yeah, go ahead.
no, it's just Hebrews, says enter, labor,
Hmm.
enter into your Sabbath rest. Don't
Hmm.
skip by it. And we've been studying here that that's a state. That's not
Yeah,
just a little time. It's how we should live.
right.
We should live
Yes.
from that place.
Hmm.
And so you're
Hmm.
just reiterating to us what we should already know. That's a good should,
Hmm.
that make every effort to enter into that Sabbath rest. Labor into it, it says.
Yeah.
So it's critical. And I am so sorry to keep repeating myself, but I need to get this in my own life, and
Hmm.
I don't think I'm alone. So I
Hmm.
am pausing and gasping and oohing and awing over what you're saying to me, because if it makes me want to just weep. It's so
Hmm.
important. What you're saying to us, Betty, is so important
Hmm.
for such a time as this, in order for us to be women, particularly, because that's who we are and that's who we're talking with mostly, to usher in the kingdom of God.
That's right.
It's a correction for me. It's a
Hmm.
discipline. It's
Hmm.
my daughter. I need you to get this.
Yes.
Do you feel that way, or did you feel that
Yes.
way? Okay. Okay.
Absolutely. And I think, we live in a world right now that feels like an empire, right? That's just pushing
Yes.
down on
Yes.
us to produce more, be more, bigger, better, stronger, faster, which
Ugh.
honestly is really this pull of the pride to
Mm-hmm.
say we
Ego.
can do it all, we
Mm-hmm.
can produce it all, which
Yeah.
actually is an oppression, right? It is an oppression unto
Ooh.
itself.
Say
So if you
more.
think about even when God gave the Sabbath,
Mm-hmm.
it was reteaching the people of Israel how they were designed to live and re anchoring them in their identity in God as not slaves of Egypt that worked constantly, but were
Right.
liberated with an invitation, right? So
Oh,
we need to be liberated. This is a
I
truth that
just
we.
made the connection. Wow.
So I think, that's as you say, sort of what is this? What is this about? Why do we have such a hard time with this? I
Mm-hmm.
think honestly, and this is what I had to explore in my own journey as I walked alongside the vine in my own story, was I have been, I think it was shame that kept me from resting
Oh.
because when we allow ourselves to let go of the fruit and descend into a dormant time in our own lives where we're not producing, where we don't have anything to show for ourselves, where we don't have a project that we're working on or something to show for our effort, it feels like a kind of shame when
Awful.
we feel like the fruit has been taken away, right? That who are we without the fruit, right? When the fruit is taken off the vine, it doesn't cease to be a vine. It's
No.
still a vine. And actually, if you go and watch the vines in dormancy and they're outstretched onto the trellis and there's
Oh.
no leaves or grapes to hide their essence, you
Mm,
see the essence of the vine in its truest form,
mm.
which is for us, our relationship with Jesus, our belovedness in God is the truest thing about us.
Yeah.
And it has nothing to do with what we have to show for ourselves. That
Really
we
doesn't.
are beloved
Mm.
apart from what we produce.
Deuce.
And that is a core truth of, first of all, liberation into the kingdom of God.
Yes.
It's and it's a core truth of our identity that if we keep trying to push ourselves into harvest, we
Mm-hmm.
will try to keep being like God,
Mm-hmm.
and we will also miss the grace of being beloved and receiving God's belovedness for us apart from anything that we do. And if you can't get that, then you will constantly be striving for
Yeah.
something that you can never, ever earn.
Ever. And it will
And
only
so
lead to dissatisfaction
that's right.
and discontent and
Hmm.
actual
Burnout.
pain,
Yeah.
burnout for sure. Yes.
Yeah.
Burnout and
Yes.
exhaustion, chronic fatigue, all of the
Hmm.
things.
Hmm.
But when you're speaking of liberation,
Yeah.
right? I had a vision of just when you had the vines outstretched after when they're in their dormant stage, and they're in their essence. I mean, they're free. They're not,
Yeah.
there's nothing heavy on them. There's no
Right.
leaves,
Yes.
there's no fruit.
Hmm.
They're just in sheer joy and living in
Yeah.
that Sabbath rest that I think we're talking about. So, I mean, what you're saying to us is, it is absolutely essential. We
Hmm.
we need to get this,
Hmm.
and we
Yes.
need to get it now.
Right. And I would say too, I think in terms of our own spiritual lives, so it's our belovedness in God, but I think it's also our tapping into our truest selves apart
Hmm.
from anyone else's vantage point of who we are. It's seeing who we are in God truly, and then it's rest, it's play, it's creativity, it's communion with God.
Yeah.
That I think for me, when I look back on, I took a 6 month sabbatical just at the start of working on this project. And
Wow.
when I look back on that 6 month sabbatical and all that God had nourished in my roots, and this sabbatical was the start of writing this book. Had I
Wow. What a way to
not,
start.
right, had I not taken that sabbatical to learn
Hmm.
these things for myself, to do the deep, difficult work of detaching myself from the fruit, withdrawing into solitude and silence and time with God, allowing myself to rest and to create out of a place of not trying to perform or produce something
Yeah.
for others, but
Hmm.
just an overflow of love and union with God, of communing with Him as I'm creating. What came
Mm.
out of that was truer to me and who I am and to who God is than
Mm.
anything else. That
Mm.
everything that's ripened since then, the book,
Hmm.
all the other things that
Retreat,
I've
all
created,
that. Hmm.
yes, that's an overflow of a 6 year journey that started in 2019 with a season of a 6 month dormancy.
Okay. Okay.
So people might look at the things that I'm doing right now and be like,
Yes.
"Oh wow, like it's always
Hmm.
harvest season for Betty." But it's like, "No, you don't know what it was like. You don't know what it was like in
No.
2019
Yeah.
when I had to go into that hidden place with God where nobody was
Wow.
watching."
You chose that
And yes.
consciously.
Yes.
Wow.
And to let go of
Hmm.
what others thought. Because truly, when we try to create something for the sake of the eyes of others, for
Yes,
performance, for what we produce, and we try to validate ourselves based on those things, those are fleeting things.
they really are. They are, and they will not lead to true joy, for sure.
It's true. Yeah. So
No.
Yeah, so I think, part of it too is even just paying attention to what season am I at, am I in right
Mm,
now, and allowing
mm-hmm.
ourselves, first of all, to pay
Yeah.
attention to the signs of the season,
Yeah.
to look around physically and spiritually. So my mom used to, with our kids, we used to go on these walks in the springtime, and she would always say, "Let's look for signs of spring."
I love that.
Where is the grass starting to
Yes.
turn green? Where are we hearing the robins? Where are we, and I think we need to pay
Oh,
attention to where are the signs of spring in our own lives?
oh,
Where are the
that's good.
signs that we're in post-harvest? Where's the
Mm.
sign that we are in dormancy? Where's the
Yeah.
sign that we are in harvest? And we need to
Right.
allow that to be okay for a
Right.
season
For a
and
season.
say,
Mm-hmm.
yes. So for me, even right now, okay,
Mm-hmm.
so I just launched the book. I just launched this first retreat and these journeys and this course and these things, and it's been harvest. And my soul is saying, it's time to slow down.
Hello. I miss you.
Yes. And so I'm chatting with my assistant, Kara. Okay, Kara,
Okay.
like when am I gotta block out the next
Yes.
month.
You're
I'm
aware
not
now. Very
scheduling
highly
weddings.
aware. Mm-hmm.
I'm not putting in things in my calendar. I am budgeting time to
Okay.
withdraw into my roots in Jesus, to
Good.
abide, to create again, to
Beautiful.
rest.
Mm-hmm.
So I just think we've sort of lost this attunement
Yes.
spiritually to where we
Mm-hmm.
are that
Yes.
we constantly need to be asking ourselves, what season is it? And what is the
Right.
season for right now?
I love that. And that would lead to the making sure we talk about terroir. Did I say
Hmm
it right?
Terroir.
Terroir. And that second question that you proffer on the back of the book, what if it ripened naturally? I have no idea what that looks like. Again, you have just stumped me in
Hmm.
so many lovely, beautiful ways. So you made the choice 6 years ago, 6.5 years ago,
Mhm.
to set aside your life and to come into a time of dormancy in the sense of feeding your
Mhm.
soul and all of that.
Mhm.
And you planted, would you say the terroir? I'm not going to be able to say this word. Say it for me.
Terroir.
Terroir. You planted yourself in terroir
Mhm.
that was fertile with silence, stillness, solitude. Is that a good way to
Yeah.
image that?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So terroir is a sense of place. And
Mm-hmm.
I think there was a piece of it for me of realizing, okay, and I had moved to Traverse City area in 2017. And so part of the vine, so terroir is everything in the vine's environment that shapes it to become what it is. So it's the
Okay.
climate, it's the soil, it's the tending of the vine dresser, it's the landscape, all of these factors in a setting that actually influence the flavor of the wine. And so
Right.
for me,
Flavor.
it was going through this journey of realizing okay, I'm planted here in Traverse City now. Well, what
Mm-hmm.
does that mean for my soul? How do I tend and allow myself to be tended by God in this place?
Okay.
So it's learning the history of the land, of the indigenous peoples of the land, and learning from them. It's learning
Wow.
from Dave and the vines in the
Mhm.
area. And then figuring out not just physically, but what is my soul's terroir? And
Yes.
allowing God to bring out the uniqueness of my cultural identity and background, my
Mm-hmm.
story, my family heritage, the different gifts that God has given me and allowing those to emerge
Mm-hmm.
naturally as opposed to trying to fit in a box that I had been of who people
Yes.
wanted me to be and what it meant to be in ministry. Right.
Yes.
And so for me, terroir was
Mm-hmm.
recognizing I have this artist's gift that's been dormant because it hasn't been invited to the table.
Correct.
And I needed to take time to allow that part of myself to
Mm-hmm.
emerge, whether or not the world was asking for it, but simply because that is my terroir. That's my story. That's my identity. And
Wow.
so, yeah.
Thank you. Had you ever lived in the Michigan area before?
Well, yeah, I lived in Michigan most all my life, just
Okay.
in different parts of Michigan. And Traverse
Okay.
City is quite different than the rest of the state. Yeah.
Okay. Well, I'm going to be
Yeah.
visiting. So
Yes, please.
what if the fruit ripens naturally? What
Mm.
what am I to draw from that question?
Yeah, so again, it's kind of this overflow of all the seasons that led up to it, right? Rather
Okay.
than trying to make fruit happen now or sort of forcing fruit because
Hmm.
this is what we think we should be doing right now,
Right.
allowing ourselves to go on that cyclical journey that is all the essential elements of what is needed to produce the fruit so
Right.
that when the time for fruit comes, it ripens from a deeply rooted place in God, from
Hmm.
a place of abiding, and it's an overflow of who we already are. It's not something we're striving to do, right?
So we
So
have to
I
know who
think
we are. That's what you're
right.
saying, though. That's we have to understand and be uh, branches removed that perhaps are not our true essence. I love
That's
that
right.
imagery.
Yeah.
I think we will know. You knew. Did
Mm-hmm.
you know after your 6 months that you were ready to move forward? There was a
Mm-hmm.
sense inside of you. You just sensed
Mm-hmm.
it. Is that how
Mm-hmm.
that looked?
Yeah. So, I mean, it was a lot of, yeah, uncovering my truest self and then allowing, after that sabbatical was over, that self to emerge into community. So that's where so the sabbatical was the season of the death of Christ, of post-harvest
Yeah.
dormancy and pruning,
Hmm.
letting God strip away everything else that wasn't what his
Let
intention
him do
was for
that.
me.
Hmm.
Yes. Then Bud Break was coming out of sabbatical. It's this transition from solitude to community, from
Yeah.
the
Okay.
soil to the branches, right? That's the energy moves from the roots to the
Hmm.
branches in Bud Break, and that's the resurrection, which is all about where do I belong in community and how can I
Yeah.
show up in my truest self here in
Hmm.
a way that is reciprocal in relationships with people, and it's fragile too. So it's then seeking out, can I find a community in which I can be my fullest, truest self here? Which
Right.
is a big
Right.
question.
It is a huge question for
and
sure.
I've and I've been grateful to find a community like that,
Okay.
that has really, I feel like I can bring all parts of myself.
Mm-hmm.
And as Brene Brown says, uh, that in order to belong, we shouldn't have to be somebody else. Like we shouldn't
No.
have to behave a
Mm-mm.
certain way in order to belong. Belonging is being who you are, right?
How do you know when you're there? How did you know when you knew who you were?
Hmm.
How do you, and that's a probably a question that is impossible to answer because I don't know, but how do we know like what might be some sense of indication that you're coming home to yourself, or how did you know maybe in your story?
Yeah, I mean, I know for me, it was recognizing, where do I come alive? Where do
Okay. I love
what's
that.
life-giving for me?
Hmm.
And also, where do I connect most deeply with God?
Yeah.
And allowing myself to tap into those things and to
Hmm.
trust that who we are is always going to be an overflow of what brings us joy. So where's your joy meter? Where does your joy meter
Love
rise?
that.
And we're doing certain things is a
Hmm.
sign of this is who you are. Because God, I don't think designed us to be, you know, hating the things that we're designed to do.
No, he didn't make us to be miserable. I mean,
Right.
he didn't. And the whole crux of the book is flourishing.
Right.
And I think that we know when we're flourishing by an inner state of deep contentment and peace and joy. Like you said, it's like I just feel home. I feel good.
Hmm.
I feel
Hmm.
like
Hmm.
my terroir. I'm just
Hmm.
gonna keep blowing this
Terroir. It's okay.
terroir. This terroir is just feels so good.
Mm. Hmm.
My roots feel really comfortable here, good in a good way, comfortable
Yeah.
in a good way. And I see buds, I
Mm.
see
Hmm. Hmm.
things budding.
Yes, it's a
Yeah.
sign of growth, but also I think community plays a part in that too,
Hmm.
of people who
Hmm.
are calling these gifts out of us, right?
Yeah.
This is what I see in you,
Yeah.
and this is where I see you thriving. This is where you come alive. This is where I see the spirit moving through you. And I think that was
Yeah.
a big piece of things too. When I came out of my sabbatical, I had this conversation with one of my board members from a ministry before it was a ministry. He was saying to me, I shared some laments of how I just felt like I wasn't fitting into a lot of the ministry context that I'd been a part of, where I just felt like
Mm-hmm.
this artist part of me wasn't welcome or didn't belong. And
Hmm.
and he said, Betty, what you feel called to do, which is to create resources and experiences using your art and writing, is incredibly differentiated. And he's the CEO of a marketing firm, and he's like, that's a really good thing. So rather than for me
Right.
seeing, oh, what I'm doing is I'm
Niched.
misfit,
Correct.
it's niched, right? So
Yes.
and seeing that as a gift and an
As a
asset that I
positive.
could offer to others
Yeah.
rather than I am misaligned or I'm a misfit or,
Mhm.
and it just changed my vantage point to see, oh, this is actually a sign that I have something to offer that nobody else does. And so I need to stay
Mhm.
committed to that because
Yes.
everybody can get all these other stuff everywhere else. But
That's
what
true.
I do is what only I can do. And that's the discernment, right? Of what is it
Hmm.
that I only can do
Yeah. What is mine
and
to
no
do?
one
Yeah.
else?
That's
What is
right.
mine?
Yeah. What
That's
is
right.
mine? What is mine to
Yeah.
do? What is, as Jesus would go away and say, Father, what's your business? Because everything's not my business.
Right.
I just need to know your business.
Hmm.
Betty, I've kept you long and I am
This has been a great conversation.
only scratched the surface. But your book, I will be devouring it. Actually, I know I won't be. I will be taking it very
Mm.
slow and digesting it. And I just invite all Heartlifters to join me in that. And Betty, where can they best find everything about you and find out about these retreats that you're building?
Sure. So you can find everything on bettydickinson.com. I've got all my paintings and books and resources on there. If you're looking specifically about the art of winemaking, you could just go to theartofvinemaking.com and you can find about the journeys and courses and retreats and the book. So I would love to join anybody on the journey of
Mm,
abiding and connecting to the vine and allowing ourselves to flourish in every season. So
thank you, God. Yes, thank you, Betty, so much. Appreciate
thank
it.
you, Janelle.
Thanks for listening today, Heartlifter. What a beautiful conversation. I feel like I've been on a retreat. The exhales and the inhales and the exhales have just been coming so easily as I have spoken to Betty. That word, terroir, the way a wine uniquely reflects the context in which a wine grows from year to year. Primary influences on terroir: soil, climate, landscape, and tradition. The particular cultivation practices of a vine dresser often pass down from generation to generation, such as pruning techniques, canopy management, and harvest timing. Terroir teaches us something profound. Our formation is deeply tied to place. I hope you spend some time with that word. I know I am going to be doing that, and I'll meet you over on Heartlift Central on Substack, which is now, drumroll, Heartlift Wellness. Stay tuned, and we will talk more about it. It would be so awesome if you could support the podcast by becoming a paid subscriber of Heartlift Wellness. You will be hearing so much more about the offerings for paid subscribers as I've had lots of time to really reflect and look inside my heart about how I want to spend the rest of my days. I can't wait to share with you what my little heart's been speaking to me. And join me on Instagram at Janelle Reardon. Until next time, may you be so filled with God's love and presence that you just stop and smile